There's a place on Earth where time feels frozen beneath the sun. No cities, no forests, no rivers to chase the sky, only silence, only sand, endless blistering waves of it, dunes like ancient breaths held by the planet, waiting for a reason to exhale. The Sahara, a sea without water, a map without names. From space, it glows like an ember, pale gold by day, obsidian by night, stretching from ocean to ocean, almost the size of China, and yet invisible in the story of modern power. I remember the first time I looked at it on a satellite map. Not just the shapes, but the absence. A vast, sunlit emptiness, untouched by wires, forgotten by infrastructure. But in that emptiness hides a secret. Every 6 hours, the world's deserts receive more solar energy than humanity uses in an entire year. That means, if we could trap just a sliver of that light, store it, send it, spread it, we could in theory power everything. No oil rigs, no black smoke, just sunlight, flowing like a river across panels that hum in silence. So I began to wonder, what if we covered the Sahara with solar panels? What if we turned the quietest place on Earth into its brightest? Would we save the world, or awaken something we don't yet understand? Let's imagine it. Not all at once, not overnight, but piece by piece, as if the desert were slowly growing a second skin. The panels would come in waves, each the size of a door, dark as polished obsidian, unfolding across the sand like quiet tectonic plates. Crews would arrive at dawn. Dust would cling to their boots, solar glint in their visors. Machines would trace vast grids across the emptiness, logic laid upon chaos, until the geometry of energy began to take shape. At first, we'd cover just a fraction, roughly 1.2% of the Sahara to be exact. That's all it would take to meet the entire world's electricity needs. That's not an exaggeration. At current levels of solar efficiency, this tiny portion could generate over 18 terawatts, enough to replace coal, gas, even nuclear. And because the desert gets more than 4,000 hours of sunlight a year, more than 4 times the average in Germany, it's the most efficient solar canvas Earth has ever known. But it's not just about energy. There's something stranger, something more biological. You see, the Sahara reflects sunlight. That's part of why it stays so dry. The sand, light as bone dust, bounces radiation back into the sky, keeping the region locked in heat but starved of rain. Now imagine we blanket it with dark solar panels. Suddenly, the land absorbs light instead of repelling it. The ground heats up, the air rises, and in the high atmosphere, moisture condenses. Rain falls where it hasn't for centuries. Vegetation returns, the desert breathes. In this model, we don't just harvest light, we terraform. And for a moment it seems almost too perfect, a planet healing itself with its own star. But nothing this powerful comes without a cost. We dream of light, but to make it real, we need more than sunlight and ambition. We need roads, rails, cables, cooperation. And not in theory, in the Sahara. A place with almost no infrastructure. A place where in some regions the nearest paved road is 600 kilometers away. Where temperatures melt metal and sandstorms strip paint from steel. You don't just drop 50 billion solar panels into a place like this. You build the world around them first, and that world doesn't exist yet. And then there's the grid. Electricity means nothing if it can't move. You need thousands of kilometers of high-voltage transmission lines, stable governments, cross-border treaties, and billions in funding. Energy may be infinite. Politics is not. And here's the deeper problem. Let's say we overcome all that. Let's say we do the impossible. We fill the Sahara with panels. What then? Well, the desert changes. Rain falls, yes, but so does the dust. The Sahara, for all its harshness, feeds life across the ocean. Its dust rides winds across the Atlantic to fertilize the Amazon rainforest, replenish the soil, even nourish plankton blooms that sustain marine ecosystems. Cover the Sahara and we may green one continent, only to starve another. We think we're lighting the world, but what if we're unbalancing it? What if, in chasing a perfect future, we trigger a cascade we cannot control? Sometimes I wonder if we understand the scale of what we're trying to do. We look at a desert and see blankness, a void we can fill, a silence we can wire. But the Sahara is not empty. It's just beyond us. It holds time in ways we've forgotten how to measure. Not in seconds or years, but in wind-shaped stones, in fossils buried beneath dunes that haven't shifted in millennia. And now we want to lay circuits across that stillness. to tame the wildest sunlit place on Earth. But I think about the heat, the hum, the quiet pressure of 50 billion panels absorbing light without rest. Imagine standing there, alone, as they stretch to the horizon in every direction. The air still, the sand dark, the sky sharp and endless. You'd hear it, the faint static of a planet repurposing itself. A low-frequency heartbeat, artificial but rhythmic. And I ask myself, would it still feel like Earth? Because there's a difference between changing the world and replacing it. There's a cost to everything we reshape. Not always in dollars, but in the stories we lose, the textures we forget. A desert that once echoed with wind and silence now pulses with energy. But is that progress or amnesia? We love to believe in control, in our ability to plan, predict, master. But nature doesn't sign contracts. It listens, maybe, then answers in its own time, in its own language. And sometimes that answer comes in the form of consequences we didn't invite, but deserve. Maybe this is who we are now. Not just a species that adapts, but one that transforms. We don't wait for rivers to find us. We build dams, bend oceans, light up the dark. We've done it before, again and again. And each time we tell ourselves this is for the better. So maybe a solar Sahara is just the next step. Not a question of if, but when. We could power the world. We could lift millions out of energy poverty. We could shift the balance, economically, geopolitically, even spiritually, toward a future shaped not by scarcity, but by light. And yet I hesitate, not because I doubt our potential, but because I know our history. We build fast, but we listen slow. We scale up before we look down. We speak of sustainability, but too often in the language of conquest, even if the conquest is sunlight. What if we did it differently this time? What if we didn't rush to cover the Sahara, but instead asked, what does it mean to coexist with light? Could we build panels that breathe with the land instead of sealing it beneath glass and metal? Could we create a solar network that empowers local communities first, not last? Could we imagine a world where progress isn't measured in megawatts, but in balance? It's not the panels that define us, it's the choice of where we place them. And more importantly, why? I imagine standing on the edge of it all. The last panel clicks into place, the wind stills, the sun, unblinking, casts its gaze across a continent of glass. Below my feet, the desert no longer breathes dust, it hums with current. It feels impossible, artificial, beautiful, and terrifying. Because in this moment we have done something no generation before us ever dreamed. We've rewritten the surface of a continent. We've turned sunlight, that ancient, uncatchable thing, into structure, into pattern, into power. The Sahara, once a symbol of absence, now becomes a machine of abundance. But I keep thinking about shadows, not the ones cast by the panels, but the ones we cast when we forget to look behind us, when we believe that energy alone will save us, when we confuse light with wisdom. A solar desert might solve our energy crisis. It might green the land, lift economies, rewrite geopolitics, but it will also ask something of us in return. Humility, patience, vision, not just the ability to build, but the courage to ask, what comes after the building? Because the truest power doesn't come from what we can do. It comes from what we choose not to do. From the restraint to listen, even when the silence feels empty. From the wisdom to let some spaces remain wild, unknowable, whole. And so I stand there, eyes squinting in the white heat, and I ask myself, what if the greatest light we ever harness wasn't from the sun, but from the way we chose to shape its shadow? What if?